All right, Pete, we are back. It is the week 2 episode of the Lex and Pete show. Next week, we will be doing our first set of regular season power rankings. Want a little more data pile up before we get into that. But for now, we're just going to keep it to week 1 reactions. We're just going to go matchup by matchup, kind of just some quick notes on everything, not get too deep into it. And we don't have many topics beyond that, but I'm sure we'll find some other things to add on as well. Before we dive into that, as always, we'll start with a word from our sponsors. Sundog Multimedia. Sundog is an online communication and social media company. What started as a personal tool has since evolved into something much bigger, allowing users to communicate, research, and discover things that impact their lives and daily decisions. Sundog will collaborate with you to build and execute a modern, yet nimble, social media strategy by utilizing innovative and traditional media principles. Sundog is also a proud supporter of the Stop Soldier Suicide Foundation. You can find Sundog on Instagram at Sundog_multimedia. That's Instagram at Sundog_multimedia. Brains, brawn, and true professionalism. That's easy peasy moving and service. Muscle for hire, moving, assembly, errands, you name it, they will do it. Easy peasy is a multi-service team. If you need something, just ask. We are past week 1 now. Before we get too deep into it, I'm just going to give, maybe my knee-jerk reactions to everything. I think my biggest takeaway from week 1 is that there really isn't much to take away. I think my big campaign now is we got to make players start playing in the preseason again. It's clearly showing in these early season games. We've seen it the last couple of years now, as there's been more of a drive from the PA and fans and all the sorts alike. They don't want people playing in the preseason. They hate seeing preseason injuries. I've always kind of been an advocate of you got to play, you got to get those reps in, you got to get your body ready. I feel like, just because somebody tore their ACL in the preseason doesn't mean it wasn't going to happen in the regular season. It's bad luck. It's a physical game. It just is what it is. You hate to see it. You hate to see somebody, lose their season before it even starts. But seeing some of these offensive perform in week 1, I think we should have the starters playing every snap, because some of these teams were horrible, and it's the teams that make a point to rest their starters. Before we get too deep into the matchups and everything, though, you had a big win this week. It was your first win in I don't know how many days. I'm sure you have the count on hand. Let's just do a quick check-in with you. How are you feeling coming off the big win?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. It's 680 days. Of course, I got it down to a T. 680 days, that's almost 2 years of non-competitive dynasty fantasy football. So to put up a 110 spot and get my first win since October of 2021 versus two pins feels pretty damn good. I'll also add on, like you said, low scoring week for the NFL means low scoring week for fantasy. We had 7 Friends Who Gamble teams under 90 points scored total. 7 Friends Who Gamble teams under 90 points total. 3 of those teams were top 6 in scoring last year. No, 3 of those teams made the playoffs last year, and the Vibers, the Bussey boys, and Go Tigers. And then you got McMorrow, who was top 6 in scoring last year, also under 90 points. So 7 teams under 90, 4 of them top 6 last year, also under 90. So it was a down week.
Yeah, and if you wanna chop off the Vibers, who they were at 89.94. If you exclude them, that's 6 teams that were under 80.82. So even that 9 points is still somewhat significant. So it was a low scoring week. It's tough to kind of get any reads on most teams, but I think that you can kind of look at it and you can figure, right? And we'll get into it when we get but some of these players, they're not going to do that every week. It was just, total kind of fluke. And I think that you can attribute it to, not getting those reps in. They're still shaking that rust off. So, by week 3 or 4, I don't think that we're going to be having many weeks like this where so many teams, were half the league scoring under 90 points. And, like I said, congratulations to you on getting that big win. You mentioned how you scored 110 points. That seems to kind of be like, you want to be around 110. If you can be anything above that, you're in a pretty good spot. If you could be flirting with 110, you're going to be competing week in and week in and week out. That was kind of the thing about my teams in the past, where I was going to get 110 every week, no matter what. And then it was up to your team to outscore me or not. You knew what I was going to get. I was never going to have that crazy upside of the 130, 140 games. So I was going to do that. So you can play winning football there. But I think for a team like yours, where, you say it's a rebuilding year, and, of course, you're still looking to add more pieces, probably in the offseason. But of course, you do have some flexibility for in-season stuff as well. But I mean, if this is somewhat of a baseline for you, then you're in a pretty good start with your rebuild.
Yeah, I'm feeling good. Should we just get right into the matchups?
Yeah, we can get right into it. And I think it's good because I do have a stat that I want to go over. So we can start with my team because it does apply to one of my guys. So the very first game, and another thing too, talking about all these teams, there wasn't any close matchups either. So it made for a pretty boring week in fantasy as well.
Right.
So as I was saying, I don't think that there's too much to really take away from this. I think that maybe players individually we can find something, but as far as judging a team and their full season outlook, it's going to be pretty tough based off of this week. But I this week went against I Love My Mom, Nick Wallace. He put a pretty good beating on me. He nearly doubled up my score. Not that he put up an insane amount of points. He did put up a great 120.82, but a lot of that blowout was attributed to me putting up 69.04 points. Tua was the one bright spot in my team, or I'd also say Jordan Addison was as well. He didn't go too insane, but he had a really exciting touchdown. It was great to see that connection. And, he had another one last week. And actually, I have the note right here. I wrote this down. Once I did my digging around about who people were going to take in the draft, and I knew that Addison was mine, I knew I was never going to waver off of that. I knew he was always my pick with that first rounder, and I'm really starting to feel good about that. And I think that that's really what my season's going to be all about. It's going to be about the little wins, seeing my guys start to break out, having Addison start to play like this so early is great. It's exactly what my team needed. Even Kincaid, I mean, his numbers weren't insane. He had 4 receptions for 26 yards, but he played a good amount of those snaps. I think he was on the field for like 75% of the game. He was getting some good looks, especially later in the game. That was also a wonky game as well. But I think the real big story, and we'll get to Tua in a second as well, but I think the real big story is the goose egg that Drake London laid, right?
Yeah.
This is the guy who I was talking about. I was thinking he could be getting 7 to 9 targets a game. I was seeing him as a potential top 5 guy when it comes to targets. He comes out, he gets 1 target, doesn't catch it. That was it. And I think that that's kind of the problem with the Atlanta Falcons and buying into their team fantasy wise is that not just Arthur Smith, but I think they're all bought in on fuck our stats. We want to win football games. It's good for me as somebody that bet the Falcons to win the NFC South, but as somebody that's also so heavily invested in Drake London, I hate to see it. I think that eventually as they get better quarterback play and they feel more comfortable slinging the ball, because you do, if you want to play good, effective winning football in the league, you got to be able to throw it. Ritter, he threw it 18 times. I think he completed like 15 passes and he had like 160 yards. And that was enough to win. And they're going to ride it out. If that's what they got to do to win it, they're going to do that. And it's our pass catchers are going to suffer. I know you have Kyle Pitts as well, but for anybody that's worried, because Drake London wasn't the only guy to put it up. And we'll get to other guys like T. Higgins, as we move on. But if you're worried about your receiver putting up a dud in week 1, don't worry, because I went back and I did the research for you. So I went back to 2022. Just did last year. I'm sure if I went back in more years, I'd find more, I'd find less.
Yeah.
But if you're worried, right? So I found 9 guys. 9 guys between wide receiver 6 and wide receiver 20 last year that finished with as low as 0 points to as high as 7.2 points. We're talking CeeDee Lamb, 3.9 points. Devontae Smith, goose egg. Amari Cooper, 3.2. Tyler Lockett, 4.3. Brandon Ayuk, 5.7. Higgins, 3.7. Metcalf, 5.1. Garrett Wilson, 7.2. Chris Godwin, 5.0. These are guys that were putting up insane numbers last year. Like I said, they all finished between wide receiver 6 and wide receiver 20, and they all put up absolute duds in their first week. I think Wilson is somebody who, you could maybe say, well, no, he was a rookie. It was his debut, 4 catches, 52 yards. So yes, that's like a totally fine game. It's a fine stat line, but compared to what we expect and what we saw last year and then what we expect this year, that's pretty low for him. And he's kind of the high outlier on that one. But you got guys, CeeDee Lamb, 3.9 points, 2 for 11 on his targets. Devontae Smith went 0 for 4 on those. T. Higgins caught both of his 2 targets, but he only had 27 yards. So if you're worried about it, don't overreact. Don't think that all of a sudden your guy can't be a top 20 receiver, because it can still happen. That's nearly half the top 20 put up, less than 8 points in their first game of the year, and they still put up those huge numbers. So if you trust your guy, if you project him to be there, stick with it. Trust the process. He will get his back. Okay. If you put up 0 this week, he's going to put up 20 another week, and it's all going to even out. Pete, what's your read on this matchup? You got anything on Wallace, maybe?
Yeah, Wallace. Well, first I'll say about your team. Tua looked incredible. Tua is that dude. QB1 season incoming as long as he stays healthy, and I didn't see any health concerns with like the Dolphins O line. So Tua is that dude. Addison's also that dude. 2 touchdowns in 2 weeks. We're obviously recording on Friday here, so we know what he did last night in the Thursday night matchup, getting decent targets, decent yardage each week. I also thought a real bright spot for your team that you didn't mention was Elijah Moore. Only 7 points, but 7 targets, and they're scheming him runs. So I just thought the usage there was awesome for Elijah Moore. So your young pieces look good. With the Drake, I'm going to start talking about the Bagel Club because there was a Bagel Club in week 1. You mentioned Higgins, Goddard's also on there. I agree that there's no reason for concern with Drake London because I love the player. I love the talent. To play devil's advocate, I guess I'd say, is he only had the 1 target, right? So guys like T. Higgins in the Bagel Club, but got 8 targets. We'll get to him and Goddard when we get down to the other teams, but it's really about that target share. Like T. Higgins, I'm not worried about. Drake, I'm not worried about with the talent, but it's the targets that he didn't really get. And kind of same thing with Treylon Burks, only 3 targets in Tennessee in this week 1. So really that target share. And then when it comes to Wallace's team, the highlights, the T-Law Ridley stack looks lethal. Calvin Ridley, I mean, he had a huge first half. I think he only got most of his points in the first half, didn't really do much in the second half. But I saw some routes that he was putting D-backs on absolute skates. So, like, I'm sure Wallace is feeling good about that trade. That stack looks lethal. Breece Hall looks 100% back. I mean, he still looks like he could have a running back 1 type year with Dalvin Cook in that room. I'm also interested to see what you think about Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, both wide receiver 1s last year. Tyreek put up a 30-point week, absolute monster week. Is he cannibalizing Jalen Waddle? We didn't see it happen last year. They're both wide receiver 1s, but I thought they looked like he was cannibalizing Waddle in week 1. Doesn't really matter because Wallace has both of them. So to get, a combined 30 points out of both of them, he won't be too upset. And then last 2 things out on Wallace's team, I thought Nico Collins, Zay Jones, Romeo, Dubes, Dobbs, whatever, all put up double-digit weeks. That gives them really good wide receiver depth. If those guys can continue to kind of put up those double-digit or, even 8 to 9 point weeks. And then C.J. Stroud. We're going to get to Anthony Richardson when we get to Bowen's team. But C.J. Stroud did everything Anthony Richardson did from a box score stats perspective. Like passing and rushing yards, he matched AR from what he did. The only thing he didn't have was the passing touchdown and rushing touchdown that AR had. So I know you and I were both low on Stroud coming into the year. I think we're still both low on him, and week 1's not going to change our mind, but he definitely had the second best rookie start for a quarterback that we saw in week 1.
Yeah, for sure. So to start at the top, I think you were first mentioning Tyreek Hill and Waddle. I do think that it is one of those, and it's like, when I had no issue having Evans and Godwin on the team, right, on my team, 2 years ago, where I just figured it's like as long as they can combine for, to apply it to Hill and Waddle, right, they combined for 48 points. So, if you want to call it that, and you want to say, well, would I really be upset if they both just got 24 points instead? It's like, if you look at it that way, then, how upset can you really be, right? Because if Tyreek wasn't getting those yards and wasn't getting those touchdowns, Waddle would probably be the guy that was next up to get those anyways. So, sometimes they are going to eat into each other. I'm sure Waddle's going to have a massive game where Tyreek just goes for 6 for 60 or something, and he puts up a sub 10 performance. So I wouldn't be too worried about him. One thing, speaking from the perspective of my team, that worries me about Wallace is that, I play him twice a year. I got Tua. If Tua puts up these big games, I'm pretty much not going to get anything for it if I'm going against Wallace because those points are usually going to be going to those 2 guys. So that's going to kill me in division for years to come, as far as I know. I think the good thing is that, eventually I'll have Kyler back, so I won't be relying solely on Tua to get me QB points, where last year it was Tua and then Mac was putting up 13. It's well, he's not going to help me at all. So knowing that I have that stack, it gives me a little bit of relief there. But it is one of those where if I'm playing Wallace and his receivers play poorly, it probably means Tua's playing poorly as well. So I think he's probably going to be my toughest matchup for as long as he's got that stack and I got Tua. Ridley and Lawrence, they do look unbelievable. I didn't have any opposition to going out and getting Ridley in this offseason. I just didn't like the trade that he made. I felt like he would have been better off holding on to DK with where his team's at. But I mean, as far as getting the player, I mean, the only question was can he get back to that after taking a year off? And there were some questions about, was his wide receiver one season kind of fraudulent because he was kind of thriving next to Julio. And then after that, right, the year before, he wasn't that crazy. The year after that, he took a step back, but it looks like he's in it. It looks like he's going to be able to do it. It looks like Christian Kirk's taking a back seat, and it's the Calvin Ridley show in that passing game with Evan Ingram kind of being, that second option tight end. And then what's his name? Zay Jones, right? He's like the other outside receiver. So if they're really splitting it out and then using Evan Ingram on the inside, it's going to be tough for a Christian Kirk owner. But I mean, he's going to be feeling great about having that stack. And yeah, Stroud, I haven't really been too impressed with him. I did watch a decent amount of that game because I was pretty locked in. I really wanted to watch the Ravens. We had that pick for the Super Contest, so I was watching a bit of that, and he didn't look bad. I mean, I think that a lot of it is just like he's on a bad offense. They don't have the best offensive line. They might not necessarily have the best play calling, and they definitely lack a lot of talent, right? And especially at the receivers who he's throwing to, right? He needs that good receiver talent. Nico Collins put up a good stat line. Robert Woods looked pretty good, but let's be honest, those aren't the guys that you want him to have moving forward. If Nico Collins ends up becoming like his big-bodied wide receiver 2 or 3, then there's probably a decent wide receiver room there. But right now, having him being the leading pass catcher, waiting on guys like Mechie to come back from injury, Tank Dell to kind of figure it out in like the real regular season action, it's to be seen. But I mean, putting up 240 yards and needing 44 pass attempts to do so, it's tough. It's going to be tough for these rookies to score, significant points this year. Talking more so about Stroud and Bryce Young, just because they don't have that huge rushing upside that Anthony Richardson has. So if they're just going to be playing quarterback, it's going to be the same tale that we see with a lot of these guys where they come in, they start slow, and it's really all eyes on 20 or on year 2 for guys like them. So, as long as they can go out there and be competent quarterbacks, then, I think if you draft them, you should feel pretty good about it. It shouldn't change your pre-draft perception of them at all. But yeah, I mean, Wallace, he's got a good team. He's got that budding wide receiver depth. I worry about the step back Ken Walker may or may not be taking, right? He didn't put up too impressive of a stat line last week. Pacheco, he got some good looks and he was getting good receiving work, but it looked like, I think it was Jeremy that made the comment. It's like he makes a lot of movement to just kind of go side to side and then run straight into a tackler. So I do worry, and that was something we had touched on with Pacheco in the preseason stuff. I worry about him kind of going the way of a guy like Phillip Lindsay or James Robinson, where they pop. But then at the end of the day, they're undrafted free agents. It costs nothing to cut them. And I worry about it. But for right now, he seems to be the RB1 there. McKinnon, I think he kind of gets his workload more later in the season. They start ramping up for the playoffs. But to put up 120 and have some of these guys have one of your flexes put up essentially 0 points and a lot of single-digit guys, that's a pretty good team that they have. So I think that, maybe it's not this year for Wallace, but I think that he's in a very good position for once Stroud, possibly takes that step up, he could be in a really good spot. To go back to my team though, talking about like the target share, it's tough, right? I mean, it's tough. Drake London did only get 1 target, but I feel like I saw enough last year with Ritter, and I think it's just going to be one of those where he's going to have a handful of these games probably, but I think he's also going to have a handful of games where it's like, he's the guy, he's getting the ball, him. I think this week against the Packers could actually be one of those games, but last week, right? If you can win the game and your run game is that dominant against the team, you're going to lean on that. I mean, Bijan was able to do it both rushing the ball, and he had 5 receptions where he was effective with that. And then Algier just, got like 20 carries, put up 1 million yards, scored a couple touchdowns. If they're going to continue to do that out of the backfield, and even they're getting Cordarrelle Patterson back, if you get him in that joker role, taking carries, running routes, I think they're going to lean heavily on that. They're going to try and run some clock. So it could be tough for the Falcons and any Falcons pass catchers this year, but I do trust that they're going to start to take that step up as they become better. They'll pass more. If Ritter can't be it, they'll go out and get the guy that can pass more. So I'm not too concerned, especially this year, since I'm not really a competitor. I'm not going to panic. I'm going to stick with my guys. Traylon Burks, I watched a lot of that Titans game. You got to remember, he is coming back from the whole knee issue. I forget exactly what his injury was. So there could have been a little bit of just working him back into it like that, because originally there was a question if he was even going to be ready to play week 1. Then he was ready to go with like a whole week to go. So he recovered very quickly, but it just takes some time. He did have a series where he got like 3 straight targets. That was really promising, because that at least tells me that the play callers for Tennessee were saying like, all right, we're going to make a point to get Traylon the ball. So seeing that he's getting those types of looks, Mike Vrabel has said, he's going to be a big part of our offense moving forward. So again, all my guys, I'm not going to hit the panic button. I have no reason to right now. These are guys where I said, hey, if they break out this year, I could be a sneaky good team. But, if they don't, I'm not going to panic, because it's year 2 for a lot of these guys. it takes a couple of years to really take that step up into being elite anyways. So that's kind of where I'm at. I need that second quarterback anyways. But yeah, I mean, I feel good. And Elijah Moore again, leading receiver. That was one of my predictions preseason. He could be the leading receiver for Cleveland. He just beat out Amari Cooper, so it's not like he's blowing him out of the water or anything like that. But to get 7 targets and 2 carries, I feel good about it. I mean, that game shifted very quickly to run heavy at the end. Once they got that lead on the Bengals, they just wanted to run that clock. They were trusting Nick Chubb. They even gave my boy Jerome Ford some carries at the end of the game. So, I think that this week, I think they'll be passing a little bit more. Monday Night Football against the Steelers. I'm hoping they pass more. I hope we can see a little bit more of both, not just Elijah Moore, but also Amari Cooper, because I'm big on the Browns this year. I know you want to see Deshaun start throwing that ball. So I'm hoping that this week can be the one that we see it, and then we see those targets go up and, get more effective targets too, maybe in less shitty weather and everything. But you got anything else on these two?
No, I like it.
All right, let's move on. We got the Bowen versus Bowen matchup. This was another blowout. Pretty similar score to me versus Wallace. The Zits had 122 even, and Go Tigers had 73.02. I think the real story, I have a lot to say. Well, I actually don't have a lot to say about the Zits, and I think it's just a very impactful message that I want to deliver. But I think really what we want to talk about here is Mikey, right? Mikey and Josh Winsper, Go Tigers. This was a bad week for them. I mean, Joe Burrow put up 3.18 points. T. Higgins put up a goose egg. Chris Godwin 7.6. His Steelers stack at running back both put up 4.3 themselves. So it's like, I mean, to get that type of output, I think we can both say that this is not going to be the average output from Mikey. I think if we're going to pick a team that is not going to be this bad week to week, he's for sure at the top of that list. I mean, that Burrow's going to come back. My word for Burrow this season was the calf injury. I referenced last year how he missed all offseason with the appendicitis. He had to get that surgery. And they were rusty at the start, right? It took them a few games, and then they went on that huge win streak, ended up winning the division. They were unbelievable. So I think it'll take some time to shake it off. I do worry if the calf injury is going to be something that lingers all year, and if that's going to hold him back all year. T. Higgins, though, he got 8 targets. It's not like he wasn't getting thrown to. I didn't watch too much of the game, but I did see somebody was saying that, if you go back and you watch the tape, most of those targets were actually uncatchable. So maybe that's more of an issue coming from, who's delivering the pass. But I think as Burrow starts to get more and more comfortable and he gets, maybe a little more healthy and a little more loose, I think those targets will be better. We know what T. Higgins is. He's a top 20 guy. So again, there's maybe not too much to say. I think it's just funny that pretty much his entire team decided to just suck ass. But he's going to bounce back. He's going to be a big bounce back candidate moving forward. I know you always have a lot to say about Go Tigers. You got any notes on them?
Yeah, I mean, T. Higgins, another member of the Bagel Club. I don't think I need to say anything there. You really did cover it. The only thing I would say with T is it might be his last year in Cincy. I know they were like very, very adamant about him staying like middle of the offseason. But they never got another contract or extension done, and I don't think there's any conversation going on about him. So, something to monitor with T. That he's not. It could be his last year in Cincy. Another theme I think of week 1, and Mikey falls into this, is the teams with the elite quarterback duos didn't get the quarterback floor. It was a down year or down scoring week across the NFL, which means a down scoring week for the quarterbacks. And Burrow and Fields combining for 18 points. That's just not going to get it done. We see what Mikey's team looks like when he doesn't have that QB floor. And there's going to be a couple other teams we talk about that experience the same thing. But without that QB floor, T. Higgins puts up a bagel. This team looks horrible. I mean, they were 40 points under their projected total for the week. Really, really bad. Justin Jefferson still does his thing, but without that QB floor, he's really not going to get there or, be a competitive team. So we have to see Burrow bounce back, and we have to see Fields do what he did last year to have Go Tigers continue to be in the playoff picture. And then the running backs, too. Like, he seems like he is full speed ahead going with this Steelers running back backfield of Najee and Jalen Warren, combined for 8 points last week. I think he's got to make a move. I mean, we had it in the division preview that he should have made a move in the offseason for a running back if he considers himself a championship team. He didn't do it. Now we're going into week 2, and he's still got Najee and Jalen in his starting lineup. So not good about the Go Tigers. I mean, there's nothing really positive to say. The only bright spot I will say is Zay Flowers. He appears to be the wide receiver 1 in Baltimore. Appears to be that dude. Looks so shifty. NFL speed.
Yep, I was about to chime in with that. He looks incredibly shifty.
Yeah, go in on that.
Yeah, so I mean, that was something that we had talked about too with our worries about the Ravens offense. Obviously, I've been very high on their
Yep.
passing upside. And I don't think that you necessarily disagreed with me. I think it was more of a loss in translation thing where we were both kind of arguing the same thing, but from different
Yeah.
perspectives. And I do agree with your take that it's going to be tough for a 1,000-yard receiver. Of course, Zay is currently on pace after one game, but it will be tough for a 1,000-yard guy to emerge. It might be, more, few guys between that 600 and 800 range,
Yep.
but he does seem like, I mean, Odell, I heard that, he was, still effective from like a real life football standpoint. I think he delivered like a really clutch block at some point in the game. And, he was doing that and he got a couple catches and everything. But I mean, they drafted Zay Flowers. They spent good draft capital on him. They want to make it work with him. And I think that, they want to usher in this new, era of passing in Baltimore.
Yep.
So why not start year one with Monken as your OC, go out, get that pass catcher and just make him that guy. And, of course, who knows if when Andrews is back, if he's going to still be getting 10 targets a game or anything like that. But he's like, he has shown that no matter where he gets the ball, when he gets the ball, he can make something out of nothing. So he's a playmaker. So he is good. And one guy I did forget to mention on Mikey's team that you had touched on, I just somehow glossed right over it. Justin Fields. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess like his passing 24 for 37. I think for him that's considered improved.
Good, I guess.
But he did that and, he put up no numbers. I mean, he put up 216 yards, so 37 attempts for 216 yards. That's already icky right there. Only one touchdown. He threw a pick. And then he just wasn't as effective on the ground. I mean, 9 for 59 is a solid rushing total, but that's not what he had last year where he was pretty much carrying his points with that rushing total. He wasn't getting the rushing touchdowns. He's not getting those massive runs where all of a sudden he's putting up 100 yards or anything like that. Because if you're doing that, then sure, if you put up 100 rushing yards and a touchdown, and then you're also playing quarterback on top of that, like you're going to put up big weeks. But if people are starting to kind of close those walls on him and not give him those escape routes, like to get out of the pocket and really get out like that, that can severely limit his upside because let's face the facts, he's not a good passer. I've seen a couple film breakdowns of his game, and it's a mixture of him just not being able to make those reads beyond his first read. And then also I think it's the play calling. I mean, I saw one play where he's rolling out to the right side and he's just like running with like the defense.
Yeah.
And there's one guy that is able to get open, but he's on the other side of the field. He's never going to be able to make that throw. So it's like, they're just setting him up for plays where he's not going to get any good looks. And then when he does get looks, he doesn't always hit them. So I do worry about Justin Fields taking a step back. I do think that it's one of those. I mean, he's not a winning quarterback and he could come out of this. He has 5 total wins coming into this year. This is a hypothetical, or not a hypothetical, but just a question that Bowen put out there. Is Fields going to finish this season with 10 plus career wins? Are the Bears going to be able to win 5 or more games this year? I don't think so.
It's a good line. It's a good line. I lean over, but I also took the Bears spread in week 1 and got murdered. So it's a good line.
Yeah, and I think to come out and it's like your first game against the Packers post Rodgers, to go out and get stomped like that by a guy that people were iffy on if he was even going to be a good quarterback, that's a tough look. They spent all this money on linebackers. They were getting killed over the middle all day. I mean, it's a bad look for the Bears, and I think it's one of those where, Ryan Poles, I don't think, he just came in. I don't think he drafted Fields, and I think that if they do end up being a tanking team again, where they're finishing with a bottom pick, I have a hard time seeing them if they have an opportunity at Caleb Williams or, I feel like Drake Mays maybe lost a little bit of hype, but there's a decent amount of quarterbacks that are going to be in this class. A lot of guys, like there are going to be a couple guys that are sharp risers that we might not have at that top now, but it's like, I mean, if they're like a top 5 pick, are they going to pass or are they going to go out and get their guy? Because it's like Fields, sure, he put up the huge fantasy season last year, but are we sure that he's like going to do that again? And if he's not even able to do that, I just don't think that he's a quarterback that's going to stick around in the league much. So yeah, I think Mikey, if he wants to try and compete this year, I agree with you. He's got those 2 firsts. He should try and make a move, get aggressive, go out and get a running back that can really, kind of, carry that team and just give you that better floor. But I mean, that's really all I got to say. I mean, I do expect them to bounce back. As we said before, the depth is absolutely putrid. So if they're totally healthy, then you can expect a good season. But if people start dropping like flies, then, this is going to be a very, very ugly year. Maybe that's why he wants to hold on to his first. But on the other side, we do have the Zits. It was a dominant performance. I mean, it was 122. I think earlier in the day, it felt like they were going to put up even more points than that. But Richardson coming out and putting up 21 points right off the bat like that. And he did it not really running that much. I mean, 10 carries for 40 yards. He did get that touchdown, which of course helped him. That boosted him up to, from 14 to 20 points. So, I mean, if you take out the rushing, that's what, 10 points right there. So he only put up 10.92 as a passer. But I mean, as a quarterback that was viewed as a raw passer, to come out, throw 37 passes, 24 of 37, 223 yards, and a touchdown. Of course, he did have the interception. I think for a guy like him, who was viewed as such a project, to come out and throw like that, to put up, like you said, the same stat line as CJ Stroud, who was viewed as like the best pure passer in the league, I think that's a pretty good sign for him. And I think Bowen should be feeling really good. He didn't start Purdy. Purdy didn't put up crazy numbers, but he was, shitting all over the Pittsburgh defense. I think Bowen's going to start going with Purdy, Richardson moving forward. And then Ayuk just had that insane performance. I mean, this is a great performance all around. I know Bowen's feeling good about it. And I think that Bowen, maybe we disrespected him a little bit in the preseason tiers, but I do want to give him his flowers there, and we can talk more about it next week, after we see how he does in week 2, because, who knows? I don't want to overreact, but I do think this is a team that we should start taking a little more seriously as a championship contender. How are you feeling on the Zits?
Yeah, week 1 in a bubble, the Zits world, and we're just living in it. They were an absolute wagon, and I was personally one that was down on the Zits in the division preview. So I also have to give the Zits their flowers. Anthony Richardson, QB6 in week 1. You gave all the stats. He did it both ways, rushing and passing. He was the best rookie passer in his debut against the Jaguars defense was made the playoffs last year. So it's not like he played the Bears and he was Jordan Love. We'll get to that later. But
they were keeping it close on the Jags for a while too.
Yeah. So, I mean, he did lose the game with that interception in the fourth quarter, but you don't get fantasy points for losing or winning NFL games. AR seems like he's advertised. It's killing me because I'll be comparing AR and Bryce Young for their entire careers. But this narrative that his passing wasn't ready appears to just be Fugazi, because QB6 did it both ways. AR's that dude. I'm sure Bowen's over the moon about him. And then outside that, just touching on a couple things. You mentioned Ayuk and Purdy. Credit to the LP show. We had Ayuk as wide receiver 1 in San Fran, I think 3 or 4 minutes ago. We preached it all preseason, you and I both. So credit to the LP show there. I also said AR and Purdy are going to be the starters moving forward. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Olave, both those dudes, they did exactly what they would expect it to do. I don't think they had touchdowns. Or no, Amon-Ra had a touchdown. I don't think.
Yeah,
Olave
he did get one, but yeah, six for 71 yards. Olave had 8 for 112.
Yeah, and then something to monitor with the Zits. David Montgomery, 21 versus 9 touch split versus Jahmyr Gibbs. So over double the amount of touches that Gibbs got. Sure, it's week 1. Gibbs is a rookie that could flip, going forward. But I think it's something to watch because I really didn't have David Montgomery as a solid week-to-week starter for the Zits. But he doubled the touches that Gibbs got. So we'll see how Ben Johnson schemes it up going forward. But I got to imagine Bowen is – there's just no downside to the Zits this week. Like he's on the moon.
And the Lions, they have been pretty open about, Gibbs' usage. And, it's pretty standard for a running back to come in and get worked into it. I mean – even looking at like the Falcons, right? I don't think that that's going to be the split in the backfield for the rest of the season. I think eventually, Bijan's going to start taking more and more of those carries and everything. But I think you can say the same about Gibbs, but I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing for Monty. Of course, getting 21 carries gives you 21 opportunities to break one loose and put up massive points. But what I like about Monty anyways is that they had Jamal Williams last year. And they force-fed him at the goal line. I mean, Bowen and I were talking about Swift last night, just saying it's like, imagine if Swift was just given like 4 or 5 of Jamal's touchdowns last year. We'd be talking about Swift totally different. And a lot of times Swift did all the work to get him in that position anyways. I mean, I was a frustrated Swift owner watching him get like tackled at the 1-yard line. And then here comes Jamal Williams to bang it in. It's like, I know that DeAndre can get it in from there. Like, come on, just give him 1. But with Monty, it's like, so they had him and Williams was like the team leader, right? He was like, he was like balling his fucking eyes
Hard
out.
Knocks
Bizarre
guy,
on Hard
speeches.
Knocks. Yeah. It was kind of bizarre at points, but they loved him there and they forced him those carries and they let him walk so they could go out and they could sign Montgomery. And I know that there was maybe, some wires got crossed and it was just like, they didn't want to potentially miss out on Williams and then also miss out on Monty because they waited so long. So they had to go get him, but they went out and got him. They brought him into this role. And I think he'll stay in that role because I don't think that Jahmyr Gibbs is really a banger between the tackles guys. He's a 20-20 guy. He's going to make the big plays. He's going to get the receptions. And then when you need somebody to hold on to the ball, put their shoulder down and run straight to the offensive line to grind out a few yards, that's the guy that you got in Monty. So I think that he's still going to be that similar goal line, red zone threat that Jamal Williams was last year. And I think that Monty is a better running back than Jamal Williams too. So I think that even as those carries start to decrease a little bit, he could still be effective and those touchdown numbers will stay up. So, having that for the Zits, it is huge. I mean, it's just a really well-rounded team right now. Having, Gainwell looked pretty good in week one. Of course, he missed last night, but Swift stepped in and he put up, one of the best performances of his career, really, especially as a rusher. So, I mean, I mean, this bench is pretty deep. I mean, he doesn't have the most exciting guys on the bench, but they are guys that can come in and put up some points. And, if he ever has to dip into that for injuries or whatever reason, I think he'll feel pretty comfortable with that. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is a team that we're going to have to start taking more seriously. And we might as well just put them on the radar now instead of being surprised in week 7 when we're like, oh shit, the Zits are pretty damn good.
I agree.
All right. Next one. Next one, we'll go with the Bussey boys versus Big Brain LLC. So I think this is a bit of a shocking performance from the Bussey boys. I mean, his quarterbacks, again, like you were saying, these two quarterback duos just did not deliver this week. Getting, pretty much, we'll call it 19 points combined between Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson in fantasy is pretty fucking nuts. And putting up 80 points for a team that I think was like second or third in scoring last year was always a disappointment. So I know you got something to say on the Bussey boys, but first we'll cover the Big Brain as well. They put up 119.78. This is kind of what we've come to expect for them, right? They're the Peyton Mannings of the league, the Clayton Kershaws. They're going to get it done in the regular season. They're going to put up those crazy numbers. They're going to set the records, and they went out and they did it again, right? I think they were top 3 in scoring this week. They put up 119. That's always a good number there. They got good production out of their running backs. Eckler put up a bunch. McCaffrey put up 24. Actually, Eckler and McCaffrey both put up 24.40. That's pretty nuts. Even Chubb, 14.7. Mixon didn't put up a crazy stat line, but that was also a game where they're getting blown out. They're not going to be running the ball too heavy. And then I think the big story for them is the, seeming breakout of Jordan Love coming out, putting up 23 points in his true debut as the starter, right? I mean, of course, he's made starts before, but to come out and do it with it being his team and to do that, I think that's very promising. They should feel a little bit better after botching their QB hunt in the offseason. But where do you want to start on this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on the running back stable. The running back stable is elite. They're going to ride this into the sunset. You touched on the individual scores for the running backs. I totaled it up. LLC's running backs scored a combined 72.3 points last week, with Simcoe only scoring 80 points. So he only needed, 9 points from the rest of the LLC only needed 9 points from the rest of their roster to get a win over Simcoe. But Bussey boys just put up an absolute.
They could have just done that with Kenny Pickett.
Yeah. So 72 points from running backs and 4 slots on their starting roster. It's just elite. Like that running back floor is going to be ridiculous. They're going to ride it into the sunset. They're going to be points for monsters. It's the reason we had them in the top 4, the big 4 of the league, and the reason we have them as a top team going into the playoffs. It's also the reason why we said they've got 1 foot out the door of the top 4 because they are so reliant on running backs, right? We're going to get to McMorrow eventually, but we saw another team that was very heavily invested in running backs who's now falling apart. So still for now, we got an elite running back room. With Jordan Love, yeah, you mentioned it. You were high on him going into the season. I was not, and I haven't changed my stance. This was against the Bears defense, so it's one of the worst defenses in the league. I'm going to wait and see. He's on my radar. He's on my radar. I wrote him off as a top, above I put him as a QB 20 to 30 this season. So he's on my radar, but I want to see a consistency. It's just a small sample size versus a horrible defense. Dallas Goedert, another member of the Bagel Club. Not much to say there, but another member of the Bagel Club. And then the wide receivers did okay. This team still wins when Amari Cooper and Devontae Adams don't catch touchdowns. Neither of them had a touchdown. They put up, I think, 7 and 9 points just on yardage and catches alone. But they don't need touchdowns because when you got their
9 catches for 103 yards combined between the two of them.
Yeah, and that's all they really need.
Yeah, and then all right, so then I mean I agree with you on Jordan Love, right? I mean, you can't, well, I guess I don't necessarily, but you can't just base everything off of this one, right? Like as a Jordan Love guy, I'm not going to be running victory laps because he put up a good performance against the Bears, but at the same time, if you believe in Jordan Love, then this should kind of reaffirm that. And then if you're just skeptical, because I don't think it's unfair to be skeptical on him. I mean, like you said, it is 1 star. You could come out and just be total dog shit against a better Falcons defense this week, but I mean, I think to come out and just do that, and there was a lot of pressure on him. So to do that, not crumble under it. And what I really like is I saw a clip, and I'd heard this in the offseason where a lot of guys, he's started to really win over the locker room. He's really well liked in the locker room. They view him as their leader. I think there is some of it, maybe it's like a little bit of resentment. Like, yeah, like fuck Aaron Rodgers. Like he didn't want to stick around. Like I don't give a shit about him.
Yeah.
But I saw one where I think he was running down the sideline. He got hit. And then, the whole sideline came right over and they just picked him up and they're slapping him on the helmet, giving him all that. So that's stuff that I like to see from like a quarterback that I like, or just a player in general, seeing the teammates get around him. I think that being popular in the locker room is, pretty important, aside from being just like good at football, but being well liked by your teammates. I think that helps you get more opportunities, that keeps you around on the team longer. So, I liked what I saw. There is still more to prove from him though. But as a Jordan Love supporter, I do feel I'm pretty good about that. On the other side of the board though, let's talk about the Bussey boys. Disappointing week. Disappointing week. I don't really know what more you can say about it. You got, like I said, 19 points out of his quarterbacks, 13 points out of his running backs. His receivers, they, held it down a little bit, 12 and 11 from Metcalf and Allen, and Debo, he put up 8.8, which, solid numbers for a wide receiver too in that system. But overall, I mean, it was just a very, very tough game. I know that you had something to say about their running backs.
Yeah, Bussey boys put up a dub. Bussey boys put up a dud, 40 points under projected score. And obviously, the main headline, J.K. Dobbins torn Achilles out for the year. Lex Lumpkin, I got to give some flowers. On last week's LP show, I have a quote, and I quote, "What I worry about in general is there is not much depth. At running back, he doesn't have much injury insurance at all. If Barkley were to go down, if Pierce were to go down, or if J.K. Dobbins were to go down, this team's going to struggle. J.K. Dobbins has that injury history with the brutal knee injury he suffered last year. All in all, this is a glass house of a running back room. If he loses one of these guys, he is going to be struggling. And lo and behold, he lost one of these guys, J.K. Dobbins, out for the year."
Yeah, it's tough to see JK go out like that. I mean, I was never like a massive JK guy. Like I thought he was pretty good. I thought it was a good prospect coming out, but he was never a guy that I was truly drawn to, right? And then of course he gets the nasty knee injury. He fought hard to come back from that. And it took him pretty long, but it was a gross knee injury. Then he comes back and he was starting to look pretty damn good at the end of last season. And then he comes in and then you tear the Achilles. And I hate to say, but it feels like maybe we're like lining up the nail in the coffin. We're not necessarily hitting it in now, but it's like we're putting it, okay, hold it right there. Let me grab my hammer.
I like
that type of thing. I mean, it's just one of those. You got a nasty torn ACL and you had other knee shit on top of that. And then to tear the Achilles, which is like, it's still somewhat of a running back killer. I know people look at Cam Akers and Deontay Foreman for how they performed last year. How they looking now? Okay. How they looking?
Yeah.
So it's like, this is still not, and it didn't sit right with me when Akers came back and people started almost laughing in the face of the torn Achilles, like, oh, he's back after 9 months. Cause he did come back incredibly fast.
It looked good last year.
But he was still, when he first came back, it was the end of not last season, but the season before. He was putting up like 2 yards per carry. That was like my best bet in the NFL at that time. Cause his over under would always be like 45 yards. And I was like, well, okay, if he gets 15 carries, I honestly don't trust him to get better than 3 yards per carry. I would just hammer that, won most weeks. Of course, last year he did have a little bit of a bounce back. Last week, and then, there is another Rams running back I'll talk about in a different matchup. But last week he had like 1 million carries and he got like 2 yards. And it seems like he's getting out carried at the goal line. And yeah, I mean, he was just very ineffective. So I still think that the torn Achilles is pretty damn serious. So, I don't know. I mean, he already traded JK away for a 2025 third. I think Simcoe feels like it's over. So he got rid of him. He got whatever he could for him. And, it might end up just being a good move because there is a chance that JK Dobbins never takes a meaningful carry in the NFL again. But yeah, as we were saying, I mean, if these running backs aren't performing, it kind of sounds like a stupid point when you really break it down, right? I mean, yeah, if his good players play like shit, he's probably not going to put up good points, but he is so reliant on these guys. And I mean, like that quarterback stack, they will bounce back, but Dameon Pierce, I said I wasn't too high on him this year. I worried about him in a very bad Texans offense behind a very bad O-line. He already lost one of his starters. Luckily, he does have Gus Edwards, so I do think he's the more desirable backup there than who the hell's Hill? The other one? The Amaral. Yeah, I mean, he had 8 carries for 9 yards, but they just happened to be 2 touchdowns. So, yeah, I do think Edwards is going to end up being the better backup to have, but they did call up Timberland Boots, and credit to Mikey Ballin. That is a backup running back that he now has. So I guess all things coming up Bowen. But yeah, I mean, I think this could be kind of an ugly season. I do worry for my buddy Ryan Simcoe. I think that he is also kind of feeling that as well. He tends to be a little more pessimistic. I think he tries to mush himself into some good luck. I've yet to see any of that good luck for him, but yeah, I think he's feeling down. I think he's talking about the possibilities and what he might do if this ends up being a year where he has to strip it all down. So I worry about the Bussey boys. I'm not quite sure if they're going to be able to repeat as such a dominant team. And it's tough to come out divisional rival. Another team in that top four that we had preseason just get spanked like that. So, you got anything else to add on this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I just with JK, last thing I'll say is he's going into a contract year, right? So like he's might not be back for the Ravens next year. He might be with a different team. I don't think he'll ever be relied on as a starting running back ever again. So I don't hate Simcoe going out to get him or going out and get a third for him. And I actually love the move by LLC. I mean, 2025 third is nothing. Okay, for JK Dobbins on the IR. So I like the move out of LLC. You hit the nail on the head with the QB floor not getting it done for them. I still have them in the playoff picture. I think I got to flip Big Brain now as like the favorite to win that division. And I still think Simcoe sneaks in with a wild card, but he's got those 224 firsts, mine and McMorrow's, that he could either take, and draft next year, or he could trade for running backs to fill that hole that J.K. Dobbins left them. So that's
and I think just based off my conversations with him, I think it is a wait and see thing. So I think he's going to give it a few more weeks, kind of get a sense of the direction that his team's going in, and then if he feels like he's just a player or two away from getting right back into that conversation, he'll trade him away. But if he feels like you know what, I don't have it this year, maybe he'll start selling off some of those assets, getting more picks, but then just sitting on those 2 first rounders that I think at least one of them projects to be top 4. And then I think, both, project to be, maybe that like 7 or lower. So, I mean, we'll see. We'll see how your team ends up performing. If you guys can kind of sustain the success over the season, we'll see what the hell's going on with McMorrow's team. But I do think at least one of those picks by one way or another will end up being pretty decent. I think both will be at least in the middle of that first round. So, yeah, he might end up sitting on those, but I think that that's something we'll get an answer to weeks from now. I don't think that that's anything we're going to figure out in the month of September at all. All right, moving on. We got you Slippery Pete versus the Most Athletic Sons. Big win for you, and I big win in 2 different aspects, right? One, you got your first win in like 1,000 days, and then 2, you created quite a margin between you, or actually no, because you guys never ended up making that bet. Right. But if this bet was real, you put quite a margin between you and the Most Athletic Sons in terms of scoring. So to come out and then talk your shit on them in the preseason and then, beat them by 35 points. It's a good statement that you just made right there. I'll let you take the reins on this one.
Yeah, I should have took the offer. I should have took the season-long offer at 2-1 odds, and I should have bet their counter offer of $50 a bet this week and then 25 for the season-long offer. So it would have been nice to win, but it still feels damn good. I mean, a win in a first regular season win in 680 days, put up a 110 spot, still a rebuilding year, but I still feel really good. When it comes down to my team, I split it up between the good and the bad, and I want to hear your reaction to each. So I'll start with the bad. Bryce Young. Worst rookie quarterback start in the league this year. I don't have high hopes for Bryce Young this year. I think he's not on a good team. It's his first year in the NFL, new system. So I'm not like down on Bryce Young. I will always compare him to Anthony Richardson for the rest of their careers, which sucks. But I'm not down on Bryce Young. I just feel like I had to say that because people are going to ask me how I feel about Pequeno B. So I'm not down on him. I just don't think he's going to have a good year this year. I'm waiting to see till next year. And you kind of talked about that with the rookie quarterbacks before. What I really am down on is the trade that I traded AR away for. So this was a trade that happened in February, complete middle of the dead offseason between me, Bowen, and Simcoe. I got to put myself on blast here. I traded Anthony Richardson, Calvin Ridley, and my own 24 first and McMorrow's 24 first and my own 24 second for Kyle Pitts and Jonathan Taylor. Now, if this trade was just Kyle Pitts and Jonathan Taylor for Anthony Richardson and Calvin Ridley, I still think I lose that trade right now. But now I tossed on 2 firsts and a second on top of it. And those 2 firsts and 24, and me and McMorrow, I've got those as projected as top 6 picks. So this trade is just, it's bad. It's really, really bad. I'm on the hook to get absolutely burned. I think I've made a lot of good trades in this league to get this rebuild done. But this week 1 in the NFL really put this trade into perspective that I just got fleeced on this trade. So I had to get that out there. And then my last thing for the bad is Garrett Wilson. That touchdown he had was insane. Absolutely insane. I mean, he played cornerback to get the ball away from the DB first, and then he played wide receiver and caught the touchdown. Absolutely insane. But obviously, Aaron Rodgers goes down for the year, affects Garrett Wilson. This year, I think it drops him from like wide receiver 10 to probably like wide receiver top 25, maybe. So he probably goes back 15 spots, going from Aaron Rodgers to Zach Wilson. But he's still that dude. Just needs to wait another year until Rodgers comes back. And Rodgers did say on the McAfee show today that he absolutely plans on coming back next year. So down year for Garrett this year. Still think he's going to be top 25. Next year, he's going to be that dude. What do you think about the bad slippery piece camp?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've kind of covered everything with Bryce Young and these rookie quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Bryce wasn't a guy that I was necessarily high on. That was never because of his ability, though. It was, strictly because he just looks like a little baby out there.
He looks small.
I worried, and that was, especially seeing him in the preseason and then watching a little bit of the game last week. The one thing that I worry about is that, there are some guys in the league that look like they're throwing straight into a wind tunnel where it's like, it just feels like they can never push the ball downfield. I'm not going to hold that against him right now, though. I mean, this is a very bad offense. I think Frank Reich is a very bad coach. I mean, he was coaching a team that was tanking for a rookie quarterback and drafted a rookie quarterback, and they didn't want to keep him around for that. So, they brought him, Carolina brought him in as like this QB expert. He's going to come and, bring this guy up, whoever we draft. He's going to coach him up, do all this. Frank Reich's a terrible coach. I don't know why we just suddenly ignored everything that went on with his tenure in Indianapolis. It was like, oh no, he's really good at this. Like, why are we trusting him now? So I think that they just need to continue to put weapons around him. I mean, he was dealing with a lot of pressure last week. The 2 turnovers weren't great. I think there were a couple times where he might have even been dropping the ball, like fumbling it, but he ended up recovering it himself. So, it was no harm, no foul there. But yeah, I think it's going to be a tough year for him, and it's not because of his ability. It's just because he really is not in a position to succeed right now. So I think that any success he does find, you should really be pumped up about that, because that would really be him kind of creating that and doing it, kind of in spite of his coaching staff and his weapons. So, this year you should really take the good with the good, because whenever it pops up, it's going to be those flashes that you expect to see out of him. Wilson is a guy where, I mean, like that touchdown, like you said, was incredible. I mean, it was an awful throw from Zach Wilson. He threw it like straight at Tre'Davious White's
right at the DB.
Yeah, it was a terrible throw. It was like all completely because of Garrett Wilson that was even a catchable ball. But yeah, I mean, like you were saying, I mean, this severely hurts Garrett Wilson's upside this year. I think that anybody that took him in a redraft is really going to be hurting, because you draft him in redraft with the expectation of like a potential top 5 receiver this year. And, he's still going to put up those good numbers. I do think, like last year, he was wide receiver 24. I think that we can get something similar to that, maybe even better, just because he's got that experience in the league now. He did take a big step back in games where Zach Wilson was throwing to him. And I mean, he's a 1,000-yard rookie, right? And to do that, you got to average like 60-something yards a game. I think he averaged like 49 yards a game with Wilson. So it's not like a massive drop off, but it's clear that he was not playing at his very best. When Zach Wilson was quarterback, he was better with Mike White and even Joe Flacco. So that's not always the best sign for this year. But like I was kind of saying about my receivers, and you're in the same boat too, or you're definitely more competitive than I am, but you're still looking forward to the years ahead. And It's like one of those where it's like there's no need to panic on it. Just trust like they're going to get him the right quarterback, whether that's Rodgers coming back next year. And even then, that's only going to be 1 year, but they're going to find him the guy, right? That's going to be their priority for years to come. Let's get Garrett a quarterback. We cannot be doing this bullshit anymore with Zach Wilson. So it might be, tough. You might have to just take it on the chin this year, but I think ultimately you're still very comfortable where you're at with, your receivers as a whole, right?
For sure. And then that kind of brings me to the good. First point about the good, Puka Nacua. I mean, I'm a damn genius. Not only did I pick him up 4 months ago in May, right after the rookie draft, 4 months ago, but I actually started him week 1. I mean, I've seen people flexing Puka Nacua pickup in the preseason, but he's on the bench. I actually started him week 1. So I just love that there. I put him on the block before the week started. I said, I'll take a second for him. Now I'm holding, right? I think I'll put it out here right now. If you wanted to offer me a 24 or 25 first for Puka Nacua, I would consider it and probably take it. Otherwise, he's a hold, right? If he comes into this Cooper Kupp role, I mean, it could be an absolute steal, or he could be a Sammy Watkins type where he puts up monster week 1s and then falls off for the rest of the year. Cooper Kupp comes back and he's no longer relevant, or relegated to the wide receiver 2, 3, 4 role with Van Jefferson and Tutu Atwell there. But I'm feeling damn good about Puka. I mean, that just feels really good to draft or to pick up an undrafted free agent. starting week one and having put up that kind of season or that kind of.
Yeah, and even if it is just like a week one flash in the pan, I think a victory lap is still deserved. To get a guy for $5 and have him put up 17 points in your lineup, I mean, that just feels good. And I think people are laughing it off, but I mean, if he continues to do it, and Puka's a guy that I would have liked to pick up myself, and it's just one of those. I know that you've offered me trades in the past, and he's a guy that I would like to have my roster, but at the same time, for me personally, wide receiver is not where I need to be spending my stuff. Right. And, I have limited assets to begin with. So, I do get a little bit jealous, and I do think that a lot of these people that are laughing you off when you put them on the block and say, oh, I'll take this for him, I'll take this for him, they could end up regretting it in a couple of weeks because you're right. I mean, I think it does help that Kupp is going to be out for,
4 weeks.
At least 4 weeks. And that's it sounds like one of those injuries where it could just be something that lingers all season. We never really see him on the field. So for as long as Kupp's out, I mean, I think that you can expect this from Puka, because that just seems to be how the Rams offense is structured, right? It's kind of the same thing with, and granted, Alexander Madison stinks, but if you're the Vikings running back, there's value in that because they run with that one guy. They really don't dip into the depth too much. They're not cycling their guys out. So it's like, if you're that wide receiver one in LA, you're probably going to get peppered with targets. It doesn't matter if it's Puka Nacua, if it's Cooper Kupp, if it's one of us, right? We're going to go out there and they're just going to throw it to us. So yeah, I mean, I think for as long as he has this opportunity, and the longer that Kupp's out, he's going to carve a bigger role. And then it's going to become one of those where, how long can you just ignore him, right? Are you just going to give Kupp 20 targets a game when you got a guy that can do it on the other side of the field as well? So for a young guy to come in, he's kind of a similar prospect to Kupp, where he didn't jump off the field, but then he really dove into it. It's like, this guy's pretty damn good. So, he's a big guy. He can do that. And he kind of has that similar look and skill set to Kupp as well. So even if he has to take a back seat and just learn from that, and maybe put that on the back burner, and then it's like, next year or something, he takes over, I think you're comfortable holding him for that, right? You got him for 5 fab. And if somebody wants to make that trade for you, then great. That's a huge come up for you. It's a great flip in value. But if not, I mean, if he becomes your, wide receiver 5 on your depth chart, then you're in a pretty
5.
You're in a pretty good spot. So I think you should be feeling pretty happy about that.
Yep. I mean, 15 targets as a rookie, as an undrafted rookie in week 1 is just insane. And then the 2 other bright spots I had on my team, Bijan didn't put up like a 20-plus point week like McCaffrey and, those top 5 guys in the running back room, but 17-point week, looked like the absolute guy. I mean, an absolute dude. That touchdown he had on the screen pass,
very impressive.
Insane. I mean, I saw some next gen ESPN stat that he had a 3% chance of scoring a touchdown on that play. I don't know how they figure that out, but that's just insane. And then with the Algier split, like Algier outscored him. But the majority of his carries came in the second half when they were already up 2 touchdowns. So he did vulture 2 touchdowns from Bijan. I do think it was a little, like, let's preserve Bijan. We're already up 2 touchdowns. We don't need him getting hurt on a play like that. And I do kind of expect the same thing you kind of said about Monty and Gibbs. Like, the carries are eventually going to go to Bijan, and Algier will, take more of a backseat role. But for now, while JT's out, it looks like I've got 2. I'm starting both Atlanta running backs, and it looks like Algier might be able to fill that role at least for a couple weeks. And then last thing, Pittman, in the divisional preview, I was down on Pittman, saying that rookie QBs just don't support high-scoring running backs or high-scoring wide receivers. And then Pittman comes out, puts up wide receiver 10 in week 1 with Anthony Richardson. So I just don't see much competition in that Indy wide receiver room against Pittman. Pierce only had 3 targets, and he's kind of that deep threat. So I think, I'm flipping the script on that take. Pittman's going to be a target monster this year, and it looks like Anthony Richardson is ready to throw the ball. So I thought that was another bright spot in week 1.
Yeah, I was hoping you bring up Pittman as well, because I feel like he's been a guy that hasn't been getting much love at all for this past week. I mean,
I tried to trade him all offseason.
Like you were saying, you were worried about that output with a rookie quarterback, and especially a guy that was viewed to be as raw as Richardson. But he came out, he got those 11 targets, was very effective with them, caught 8 of them, 97 yards and a touchdown. One thing, if I may defend my guy Alec Pierce, and it might not be him, because it could be Josh Downs taking that deep ball roll too.
Yep.
A lot of those Richardson throws were just, kind of short and intermediate throws. I do think that as he gets more comfortable, he'll start taking those deep shots. And, Pierce is a guy that has already shown that he can, provide in that role. Downs is actually a pretty good downfield guy. So maybe it's one or the other. Maybe it's one of those where, you can never really find value in either of them because you can't predict which one's going to be getting the deep ball. But I do think we'll start seeing more of those as the season progresses on. But for now, I mean, Pittman's just going to eat those targets, right? He's like the stud receiver. He's a safety blanket, a guy that you can rely on. So I think that Richardson's going to always be that guy. And then, or he's always going to be that guy for Richardson. And then, Downs and Pierce might be those guys where, maybe they're better off in best ball just because you're never going to comfortably start them. But they are going to have a week where, one of them catches like a 60-yard touchdown. And, that's all of a sudden that's something that you could use. So, I think overall I'm pretty, I was impressed with what I saw out of the Indy pass offense. I didn't watch it too closely. I wasn't too invested in that game, but just from what I saw, Richardson for sure impressed in his debut. And, I think that doing that, I think all, kind of stress about the receivers there, I think that's been kind of alleviated. All right, let's get to the other side of that board too. The most athletic Suns. This is a team that I think everybody but them thinks that they stink. And, they continue to go out and put up weeks like this. And, we've said it in the past, they're a team that any given Sunday, they are capable of popping off for like a 130, 140 point game. I don't know if that's necessarily the case anymore, as it was in years past, but, Dak put up, it's tough to get a read on that game, right? Because it was such a blowout and they were just running it. So Dak wasn't throwing too crazy. Goff, again, right? Goff is a guy that can play at home in a dome. When he has to go on the road, tough environments, he doesn't look great. And he really didn't look great against Kansas City. He was able to, help lead them to a really good win on the road week 1 against the defending champions and Patrick Mahomes. But I thought a lot of times Goff looked pretty bad. I thought that he was missing a lot of guys that were wide open downfield. He wasn't making great throws. Like his actual throws didn't look great. So I wasn't too impressed with him. I do think that he's really a high-end QB3 in a super flex league. I don't think he's a guy that you can feel too comfortable with him being your week-to-week starter just because you really can't trust him outside. You can't trust him in bad weather. So you can start him comfortably in those home games and everything. But yeah, I just don't love him on the road like that. So to go out and put up 14 points in a game like that, it wasn't really the most encouraging. And then, the rest of his team was just, pretty goddamn awful, right? Gibbs just didn't get a lot of touches. He's starting, Mike Evans didn't end up getting a touchdown. Brandon Cooks put up 3 points. He's dealing with an injury. Darren Waller put up 5 points. He's dealing with an injury. Kadarius Toney is just, he's horrendous.
Horrendous.
Kadarius Toney might at this point be the worst receiver in the league. And Angelo, I don't know what the hell he was doing. He was embarrassing the whole league, going on Twitter talking about how, would you talk about Justin Watson or Justin Ross like this? No, because they weren't first round receivers. Of course I wouldn't talk about them like that if they dropped it. I'd still say like, hey, you can't be dropping these wide open passes. That's why you went undrafted. But when we're talking about a guy that was taken like 22nd overall, which was still like, that was a reach for a guy like him. He should have been more of like an early second round guy. But this is a first round receiver we're talking about. This is a guy that is getting so hyped off of like one massive game he had as a rookie. The guy can't stay on the field. Seems like everybody in the world thinks he's a dickhead, and he is a dickhead. So he goes out. He's running victory laps because the Giants got blown out 40-0. It's like, dude, your team lost too, and you were to blame. So what are you doing running victory laps on your old team because they lost as well? So he's a loser. I would never feel comfortable starting him. And, even Jamal Williams, right? 18 carries, only got him 45 yards, 2 catches for 7, and he wasn't getting those goal line touches. I do think that, when it comes to New Orleans, I do think that they're maybe looking more like Taysom Hill at the goal line, that type of shit, more wildcat stuff, get him running the ball, his big bodied self. So Jamal Williams, the clock's already ticking on him and Alvin Kamara coming back. I guess you could make the argument that the Suns would have Kamara coming back into that role. Maybe that can help him. Maybe that can get him that should be enough to get him into the 80-point range at least. But yeah, this is just a team that it's like at some point they just got to get it. They don't have it. They got to start like selling out to really get like actual good young guys. They're just like, oh yeah, I got this guy at the start of the second round. Like I think he's a pretty good prospect, and maybe he's a decent real life football player, but he's not putting up the fantasy numbers. They need guys that can put up fantasy numbers, and they're not getting that right now. How are you feeling about the Suns? That's a team obviously you had a strong take on and their scoring output for this year.
Yeah, I gotta read the tweet because it's just all time. Like he says 2 tweets, used probably all the characters he needed to. I'll read it here. Quote, Tony had the worst game of his life last night, but y'all are crazy if you think he actually sucks. He sucked. Would y'all be this butthurt if Ross or Watson did the same? Yes, his mistakes lost the Chiefs the game, but that could have been any of those receivers last night. 3 minutes later, another tweet. With one game down in week 1, Y'all are ready to cancel Tony. What's even funnier is the people who expected the Lions to give Gibbs 20 touches his first ever NFL game against the reigning Super Bowl champs. Everyone relax. It's a long season. So it's just hilarious. Like you're just defending your guys on Twitter against the dynasty community after week one. It's laughable. It's laughable. I think if it really was a long season and there wasn't concern for these dudes, Jalil wouldn't have tweeted that in the first place. So I think just tweeting about it kind of says it all.
I think it tells me that they're hitting the panic button. And one thing for Tony, right? He has 20 career regular season games. Only 4 of them he's gone over 10 points.
Yeah, I mean,
my bad. I do think he's yeah. Sorry, is that good? Are those good stats to have? Yeah, I don't think so.
I'll bring it back though. One bright spot of the Suns roster is Travis Etienne, running back 6 on the week. Tank Bigsby still did vulture 1 touchdown, but he was still running back 6 on the week and put up almost 19 points. So the one bright spot on this roster I've got is Travis Etienne.
Yeah, and who knows? I mean, with Kamara coming back, A-Chain wasn't healthy last week, but I mean, he is a perfect fit in that Miami system. But I also worry if Mostert's healthy, how much is A-Chain really going to see? Is he going to see meaningful volume this year? So I just worry about that. Of course, speed kills, but I mean, Mostert's got plenty of that as well. He's a veteran that has been thriving in this Miami offense. So I just worry this week, right? I mean, even Rashee Rice, he did put up 10 points. He did get that touchdown.
Good bright spot, yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, 3 catches, 29 yards. It's not like he was really, putting it up. I mean, that was like a goal line touchdown. It really could have been anybody. So, I mean, there's not really too much to take away. Just not a lot of points were scored by the Suns this week. Not even, I mean, I think they had like 5 total bench points. So, I mean, they got Josh Kelly that they could start if they want to, especially if Eckler's going to be out. That could be a guy that takes on that role. But I think it's kind of fool's gold, right? I mean, Josh Kelly's been a guy that has struggled to hold down a backup spot in LA his whole career. I mean, he's in like year 3 or 4 now. He was struggling with fighting off like Isaiah Spiller last year. And there was the other guy, he plays up in Detroit right now. I forget his name, but I mean, this is a guy that he's a career backup. He has never been able to carve out any meaningful carries for him. So I'm not going to get too excited over, a week 1 performance. I mean, Kellen Moore is the OC in LA right now. He did have success with Zeke and Tony Pollard, so there could be maybe a 2 running back aspect to that system. But you know what? I'm focused more on my boy Elijah Dotson. I think he's going to come in, especially if Eckler's out, and I think he's going to be the one that really steals the show. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's too much. I think it's just at some point the Suns got to realize they're not great. Moves need to be made. I mean, this is a team that like they keep saying, right? They'll get offers for a guy like Darren Waller, and they'll get offered like a 2nd rounder or something, and they'll just laugh it off. It's like, what are we laughing it off for? Like, why are we so focused on 31-year-old Darren Waller? We're clearly a team that needs to get younger. Yeah. You can go out and you can get other good tight ends. Like you can do that for cheap. Tight end is not a position where you need to, spend big. You need to have that guy. We talk about it all the time. If you have tight end 6, you might as well have tight end 22, right? So, go out and do that. And like, I mean, maybe now, time has kind of passed them by and like, they're not going to be able to get anything, of substance for Waller. But, sometimes you just got to take whatever you can get and you just got to be happy with it. So, at some point they'll learn, you got to learn to like, let things go and not just hold on to that and run their value into the ground. But they still haven't learned that lesson. They don't seem interested in doing it. You got anything else to add on this matchup, or we can move on?
Move on. That's about it.
All right, here's another boring one. I mean, I think that's kind of just the trend. I think every matchup's been pretty boring, but we got Sfogliatella versus Team 2 Pins. Somewhat of a down week from what we expect from 2 Pins, but they only needed 72 points to score anyways. So Mahomes put up 20 points. Stevenson put up a very modest 11. Sanders put up a modest 10. And then, I think, his receivers were disappointing as well. He's of course missing Cooper Kupp. That's a big player for him, but Diggs put up 21, Devontae put up 14, but then his 2 starters with Chase putting up 6 and then Lockett putting up 2 is very underwhelming. And then George Kittle, that's something that we've talked about before, right? I think most weeks he's just an average tight end, but the value in Kittle is that, and you can make the same argument for Hawkinson too, right? These are guys who they're going to put up, 5 to 10 points most weeks, but unlike the other guys doing that, they can give you that 30-point week that can literally win you your matchup. And that's what makes them so much more valuable than those other guys. So it was kind of like a weird week from them. They got decent play out of their QB stack. They got decent play out of their flex receivers. Everything else was pretty mid by their standards, though. What is it really? I mean, is it even worth going down the list on Amaril's team? Like, is there anything worth commenting on? Howell looked good, 15 points. He looked good. He looked good, not great. He did take quite a hit. He was taking a few hits from the Cardinals defense. Baker Mayfield, I guess, 16 points. That's what he always puts up when he's a starter. So it's not really shocking. I guess it was shocking to see him be, somewhat competent and lead his team to an underdog win or anything like that. But beyond that, I really don't think that there's anything to say about Amaral. What's your read on this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, there's just not much to say about this matchup. Coming in, you've got the worst team in the league versus the best team in the league compared to last year, right? So, surprise, surprise, the headline of this matchup is the bad team played bad and the good team played good. I mean, you're saying Two Pins had a down week. They scored 110 points. Like, if your down week's 110 points, you're still that guy. You're still those guys. So Two Pins are still those guys. They're the only team that had their QB duo, Mahomes and Herbert, give them the floor that we expect them to get. The one thing I guess I'll add on Two Pins is 18 touches for Miles Sanders really jumped out at me. That's a team that, historically doesn't invest in the running back position. Sanders was a guy I think they got for Ayuk at the end of last year towards the trade deadline. 18 touches for a team that doesn't really invest in running backs is awesome to see. So it looks like he's going to have, a good floor, a good RB2 with Miles Sanders for the rest.
Yeah, and he was a lost fumble away from meeting his projection as well. And who knows if he doesn't fumble that ball, maybe he gets more carries, more points, etc. So I mean, solid weeks from his running backs, nothing too crazy. Ramondre just couldn't get much going on the ground. 12 for 25, was very active in the receiving game, and then I mean, Sanders was active in the receiving game too. He had 6 targets himself, but he had 4 catches for 26 yards. So that's a lot of touches. 22 overall touches, 24 if you just count the targets, and then pretty much 100 all-purpose yards. That's a good start. I mean, no touchdowns. If you don't score a touchdown, that always, that typically limits your scoring anyways. So to put up, about 10 points, 10, 11, 12 points with no touchdowns, it's solid, right? Those touchdowns, they should come. I don't know how many the Panthers are necessarily going to get, but I do think Ramondre will be able to get a few more like that. So it's solid. It's solid running back play for how their roster's built. I think anything above that is, just like a cherry on top. But what he really needs is Jamar Chase to start putting up those big numbers, alongside Diggs, Smith, and then, Cooper Kupp to come back. I mean, Lockett's going to have his big weeks, but he's also going to have his down weeks. So, it's the team. If this is like their floor at 110, then, they're in a pretty good spot. And as always, they're the standard until somebody comes and takes it from them.
Yep. And then I guess one thing I'll add on Amaril's team, you mentioned it, Sam Howell, 15 points. I was ready to come on here and have to explain the trade for Howell again because the Arizona Cardinals defense is horrible. They're the worst team in the league. But he only put up 15 points against them, and that's with a rushing TD. So I'm not regretting the Sam Howell trade. Felt like I need to get that out there. And then we're gonna skip over Amaril's team throughout the season because it's a snooze fest. But I think the one storyline we're gonna have is when he'll be able to sell these pieces that could give a team that's competing some more depth. So guys like Baker Mayfield, right, put up 16 points. Baker Mayfield's not going to be the franchise quarterback of Sfogliatella's team. I'm trading Baker Mayfield as soon as I possibly can if I'm Amaral, especially off a 16-point week. Like I'd be trying to move him this week before he puts up a dud. Ritter, 8 points. Probably not trading him this week, but if he does put up a big week, I'm trading him right away. So it's just kind of like when Amaral can sell these pieces that aren't going to be part of his future, but could help a competing team. And then I thought Sam Laporta, 5 targets, 5 catches was a bright spot too.
Yeah, Laporta, he put up the most receptions in a rookie debut for a tight end since TJ Hawkinson. Hawkinson had like 9, I think, but Laporta putting up 5, kind of crazy. I mean, Dalton Kincaid was at like 4, and it's like that didn't really feel like he was putting up like a legendary tight end performance. But Laporta, he wasn't getting like deep targets, but he was out there. He was active all game. He was always on the field, and he was like a little bit of a safety valve for Goff as well. So maybe he's not necessarily, we're not going to see that huge output yet, but I mean, Iowa tight end, that's always something intriguing to me. And seeing him be so active from the get-go for a position that's, typically takes like a year or 2 to really pick up, that's very promising. So it does feel good for him. And then, I mean, my only knock ever on the Howell trade was that I felt like Amaral was already in position to get himself 2 quarterbacks. I didn't feel like that was what he needed to do to go out and get one. But at the same time, if Howell ends up being a stud and being a consistent starter, then he doesn't have to use a pick on Drake May or something. He can just have Howell and Caleb Williams and then Desmond Ridder as his QB3. And it's like, all right, that's like, you're in a pretty good spot. And then you could use those other picks on, filling out the rest of that roster and getting those, talented skill position guys. So Yeah, I mean, it's just a team they're going to be, at the bottom every week. There's not really much to talk about. Even like these rookies, there's not too much to get, crazy excited about either. So I do think that's a team we're going to continue to just kind of gloss over, in these recaps. But you got anything else to say about the reigning half champ or the likely 1-1 next year?
That's it. Let's move on to our last matchup, McMo at the Vibers.
Yep. Finally, we got the Vibers versus Carson Wentz. He did shorten that name down to just the laughing emojis for 1 week. But he couldn't stay away, right? I think that he was reading the rumors that the Jets might go out and try and get one of the free agent quarterbacks, and there aren't many, so that kind of limits the list to just Carson Wentz. I have heard, and people speculating, they could go out and trade for Jameis. I don't know if they're going to do that. I don't know if they're going to be so rash to like kind of just go out and just like make a trade for a guy. I mean, really, you're a team with Super Bowl aspirations. Are you really going to spend out the ass because Jameis Winston's the guy that can get you over the top? I don't think so. So I don't think a trade like that is too likely. I think if anything, they're going to try and bring in, maybe a guy like Carson Wentz, or maybe they try and make a cheaper trade for a guy like Gardner Minshew or something. I'd rather have them than, trade up for whatever Jameis's price likely is. But anyways, McMorrow's team did lose, but it was close. It was a close victory. These were two teams that were projected within 4 points of each other, and then they finished within 9 points of each other. Of course, they were both like 20, 30 points below their projection. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. What do you got on this? I mean, I think this is a week with some shitty quarterback play, right? Josh Allen put up 9, Rodgers put up 0. Daniel Jones put up 4.6, and then Kirk Cousins was the high scorer with 16.46. How are you feeling about either of these teams? Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, it's more the same with Igmaro. Like, we're not changing this, narrative we've talked about when he's going to sell. So it's just more of the same. I'm not going to go repeat myself there, but a couple interesting points I thought were notable to say. Derrick Henry lost the snap share to Tajay Spears. Derrick Henry had a 48% snap share, Spears a 54% snap share. Now, that said, Henry had 17 touches to Spears 4, but something to keep an eye on. We talked about when McMorrow's going to sell. He's slowly losing value by holding on to Henry. So it's just about when he's going to sell him. We're already seeing him start to slip. Deontay Johnson hurts his hamstring. Another reason why it's a guy McMorrow should sell. JSN didn't look like 100% yet. He's still the wide receiver 3 behind DK and Lockett for at least another year. And this once the league running back room has really fallen off, right? Pollard's still that dude, but Henry, Cook, and Zeke have all 3 slowed down from a box score standpoint. And just looking at them on the field, they just don't look like the same guys, those 3.
Yeah, Dalvin did not look great
no.
against the Bills.
Yeah, and then Henry just being on the field 50% of the time is just tough.
Yeah, I mean,
they're it's like trying to slow him down.
The thing with Derrick Henry, right? And you're talking about how McMorrow's holding the value, and I keep using the example with Angelo and Tom Brady, right? Like they just wait and see and let him try and recoup. We all know how good these guys are. I don't think anybody thought that Derrick Henry stunk. I don't think, especially on a yearly basis, I don't think anybody's looking at him like, I think he's going to take a step back. Now it's just the issue is that, I don't want to pay 2 first rounders for a guy that might have 1 or 2 good years left. And that's why, he should have just traded it earlier when he got the sense that, his team was taking a step back from that year 1. He should have been more aggressive with trying to get those trades. And like I keep saying, sometimes you just have to be happy with what you can get, because instead you get left holding the bag. And it's like, a guy like Derrick Henry, what are you waiting to see from Derrick Henry? And even, like Zeke Elliott was a guy I was poking around on just because I'm a little, low on running back depth. So I figured, if I could use like one of my picks or something to get like a starting caliber running back, then, why not do it for cheap? So I was poking around on Zeke and Dalvin and just seeing, like, hey, like what's the price on them? And McMorrow told me, he's like, well, these are guys that like I'm waiting to see. But it's like, well, what are you
waiting?
What are you hoping to see from them? Like, what do you need to see? Like, what is your outlook on that? Because it's like, first of all, tell me, like, if you want them, if you think that by week 3 they could be playing well enough that they're worth this, and this, why not just say, well, hey, like, I want to hold and try and get them for that.
Right.
Because how do you know, like just hypothetically, right? If you say like, oh, well, I think that, Zeke can, become like a good goal line threat for the Pats. And, after he scores, 5 touchdowns in 3 games, I think I could get, like a 2026 first for them. Well, how do you know that I'm not willing to pay a 2026 first? Of course, I don't have that, but just hypothetically, how do you know I'm not willing to pay that? Why does it hurt to ask, right? Like, why not just throw that out there? I don't understand the mindset of, oh no, I want to hold until the trade deadline or something, because we've talked about it too. It's like, say Zeke goes out and puts up that 3-touchdown game for the Pats. Well, fuck, like, why do I want to trade for him now? I missed the 3-touchdown game. So it's like, he's never going to do that again. So why now I almost have to discount him coming off of that. So
Right.
I don't get that mindset. I think that it's like at least worth just being like, yes, this is how I value it. It might be above value, right? Like a guy like Tua, right? Somebody might throw an offer at me for, like 2 firsts and then like some shitty ass quarterback. And it's like, honestly, like, I just don't think that that's good enough for my team. I think I'm better off holding on to this guy. And that's fair. It's like, and if I say, well, you know what, it would take 4 firsts for me to get off Tua, you can think that's ridiculous, but that's my price. That's how I value him, right?
Yep.
And I don't even know if that's how I'd necessarily view him. I'm just, trying to give a bigger example, but it's like, yeah, that's my price. If you want to pay it, you can pay it. If not, I'll gladly keep him. And that's
So
a fine outlook to have, but to just like kind of have that number, like kind of keep it to yourself, I just think that's counterproductive. So yeah, I mean, it was a tough start for McMorrow. I do feel like we might see maybe not as low as this, but I do feel like he's going to be more of like a 90 to 100 point a game guy. Rashad White, he was got a bunch of carries, but he was ineffective
15.
with them.
Yeah, 15 carries just didn't look good. I don't think he's that good.
Yeah, and that was against a Minnesota defense that we just watched get torn up by DeAndre Swift. So, that, and, Sean Tucker's already getting touches as well. So it's like, Rashad White doesn't necessarily have that backfield on lock. And then, a guy like Deontay Johnson too, right? He's already dealing with a hamstring injury. This is an opportunity for guys like George Pickens or even my boy Calvin Austin or Allen Robinson. I mean, Allen Robinson looked halfway decent last week. It's like these are opportunities for them to step in and take those targets. And it's like, at some point you just have to say, yeah, these guys aren't part of my overall vision. Why not just strip it down and take what I can get for them? But the clock's ticking. I mean, the more time that passes, the less valuable they become. So it's a risky game to play. I don't really know what the outlook is, what the end game is. And JSN, just like, my guy Charbonnet, I forgot to mention him. It does feel like the Seahawks might just be bringing these rookies along slowly. I mean, for Charbonnet, at least, Ken Walker, he was getting like no touches at all until Rashad Penny got hurt last year. And then, he went nuclear. So I think that might be Charbonnet's kind of best bet this year too. I mean, Ken Walker's guy that's been, a little injury prone. He gets banged up a little bit, so he could have that opportunity. I don't think it's going to be as easy for JSN. I mean, they could run, a bunch of 3 wide receiver sets, but you're still competing for targets with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. So I think it's going to be hard for him to come by some targets in his rookie year. Again, just like we've been saying with these other guys, that doesn't mean you should panic. You knew what you were getting into, right? You knew you were drafting a guy that was wide receiver 3 on the team. Same with Quentin Johnston, right? Like, realistically, when you step back and you look at it, you say, well, yeah, I guess I shouldn't have expected that much of an output from them.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, this is a tough team. On the other side, you got the Vibers. I mean, you can kind of discount it. They just, Rodgers was a guy that could have put up 20 points for them, and they could have been looking at 110 points or something last week. Didn't happen, right? Rodgers, obviously, they made that trade for him in the offseason. He went down 3 plays in. Off the record, that might be one of my favorite plays in football. I never root for injury. I never do. I am a big karma guy. I think Aaron Rodgers is a fucking loser. He comes in, he talks. He won 1 Super Bowl a decade ago, and he comes in talking like he's Tom fucking Brady. Oh yeah, like I know what it takes. No, you don't, man. No, you don't. Because if you did, you would have gotten back there, right? If anything, right, when you do something once in 20 years, I call that a fluke. That's just my opinion. You do that once. How many times are we going to see him go 13-3 in the fucking regular season and lose in the divisional round? He's a bozo. He comes in, he acts like he knows how to do it. He doesn't. So, it was pretty fucking hilarious seeing him run out. He's a 9/11 truther, and he's running out on 9/11 with the American flag for the New York Jets. And everybody's like, oh, this is so great. This is one of the greatest moments in American sports history. Yeah, you know what? One of my greatest moments happened, 10 plays later. So that was pretty fucking funny to see. Fuck the Jets, whatever. Luckily, they did trade for our boy Mac Jones. He does look much improved in this Bill O'Brien system. A lot of it did have to do with playing from behind, right? And, he was, a pretty guilty culprit in getting us into that 16-0 hole, starting the game off with we're down 3-0, and then he throws a pick 6. And then, Zeke had that fumble, and that put him right in scoring position. And, the defense held it the fuck down for the rest of the game. They allowed 9 points after that. But Mac Jones, I mean, he came out, threw the ball 54 times. I don't think that we're going to see that every week. But to see him go out there and sling it like that, and he was making some good throws, 316 yards, 3 touchdowns. Of course, he had that interception at the end. Mac Jones sneaky has some legs. I mean, he had 2 carries for 15 yards. He's not a guy that's looking to run ever. I wouldn't even put him in my category of quarterbacks that can run. I know I always make that distinction of running QBs versus guys that can run. Yeah. But when push comes to shove and he absolutely has to do it, he actually has some decent legs and can get you like a 10-yard run. He was doing that a lot last year when he came back from the ankle injury as well. So, it was very promising to see him do that. He doubled up his projection. I don't think he's going to be a 24-point-a-week guy. I do think that, it's going to be a little bit tougher, but I mean, if he's 16 to 18 points, that's all I ever wanted from him when he was, one of my quarterbacks. So you can do that. I don't think that they're screwed losing Rodgers like that. Even, if they had Derek Carr and they're giving him 14 points, they're still getting over the 100-point threshold there. So this is still a good team, the Vibers. They it wasn't all there yet. But I do think they'll get there. Cam Akers, like we were talking about, 22 carries, 29 yards. They got other running back depth. They got other guys that can play in that. And, I think that they'll figure it out. They'll figure out what their most ideal lineup is, and they'll continue to be one of the more dominant teams.
Yeah, I agree. You're getting Kelsey back. Josh Allen's not going to have 4 turnovers.
Yeah, I forgot about that too. They didn't even have Kelsey.
Yeah, you're getting Kelsey back. Josh Allen's not going to have 4 turnovers every week. I mean, Matt, you talked about Mac. I don't need to talk about Mac of the past, but QB2 last week, like that's just awesome to see. Mac Jones QB2 in fantasy against an elite Philadelphia defense, so it's not like it was fluke. And then I guess I'll say just with the trade that the Vibers made, right? So they traded Kyler Murray for Aaron Rodgers, Mac Jones, and Aaron Jones, right?
Yep.
You're getting a QB2 week out of Mac and Aaron Jones. I don't know where he's ranked in running backs, but I think he had like 20-something points. So elite win now piece. I think if you're the Vibers, you still got to be happy about that trade, right? Like Aaron Jones is going to be a top running back for this year. And Mac Jones appears like he's going to be a solid week-to-week starter. So I think the Vibers are glad they got Mac in that deal with Rodgers. They're getting the Allen back next week, or Kelsey back next week. Allen looking to bounce back next week. And like you said about the running back depth, you had Raheem Mostert get 10 carries and Brian Robinson get 19 carries, who looks like a week-to-week starter in the flex spot for him. So no concern for the Vibers, down week, but they're still in that top 4 playoff team looking for a championship.
Yeah, and speaking of that trade, thank God I did that, because if I held Aaron Rodgers into week 1, I would be fucked. I would be absolutely fucked. I'd never get a good quarterback again.
Massive trade.
Yeah, so even if they still come out of that and they still achieve what they got, right? They still have hopefully I think we're all hoping that Mac is a good fantasy option by default, just because that would mean that he's playing well in real life. But getting that and then getting Jones on top of that, they still accomplished what they needed out of that trade. They needed win now pieces. Kyler Murray was not going to help them at all this year, even though it does sound like there is an outside chance of him actually coming back like halfway through the season, but I'm not going to get my hopes up on that. But yeah, to still have Aaron Jones putting up those big numbers, of course he's dealing with like a hamstring injury right now, and then Mac Jones putting that up, they still got to be feeling pretty good. They shouldn't be feeling like they got fleeced or anything like that.
One last thing I wanted to add, and I'm going back to Derrick Henry, but I got to bring it up again. McMorrow had the offer at the trade deadline last year, Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook, for Javonte Williams, Terry McLaurin, and 2 first-round picks. Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, or Javonte Williams, Terry McLaurin, and 2 first-round picks. He turned it down. He's not even close to that value for those 2 now. We talked about it a lot, so I'm just going to ask you, if you are a big brain, I mean, they don't need running backs, but a competitor, right? You're a Simcoe, you're a Vibers. You've got all your picks available. What draft picks are you shelling out for Henry? What for Cook, and what for combined?
For Henry, I think I'd still do a first.
A single first?
I think if I'm a competitor and I have, a treasure chest of draft picks, I think I'd be willing to give a first. Of course, if it's like a projected early first, mid to early first, probably not. I'm talking more of like a playoff team first, something like that. Yeah. And then, if I got to sprinkle something on top, like I think I'd still consider that. Cook, not even close. Cook,
a second.
I was going to say 1 or 2 seconds, depending on how badly I needed him. But I mean, there's really not too much urgency from there. I was going to flip it back around on you, talking about that package he was offered. Would you even do Terry McLaurin for Derrick Henry now? If you own Terry and you needed a running back, I think that's like a 50-50 trade there. I think that is like close to the value right now. So the fact that he could have also had Javonte Williams and a couple firsts on top of that, that's going to be one that should keep him up at night.
Yeah, and that's the point I was trying to make, right? Like you said, you'd pay a first, maybe a second for Henry, and then 2 seconds for Dalvin Cook. So at most, we're paying 1 first and 3 seconds, maybe 2 firsts total if you get someone who bites, which is I mean, last year, right? He had McLaurin, Javonte Williams, and the 2 firsts. Now he's barely getting 2 firsts. So he's already lost Javonte and Terry McLaurin type value by waiting another year. That's the kind of the point I was trying to get to there.
Yeah, for what it's worth, too, on Keep Trade Cut, Derrick Henry and Terry McLaurin, they're separated by 130 points in value. Derrick Henry has a slight edge. So the difference between Derrick Henry and Terry McLaurin is a guy like Jalen Guyton, Jake Haener, Hassan Haskins. You know, I mean, that's one of those where it's like, I'm not even gonna worry about throwing those guys on top. It's a 50-50.
Hassan Haskins. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, just the fact that he could have gotten Terry McLaurin and Javonte Williams and a couple first rounders, that might be one of the most botched trade declines in league history.
Yep.
I think so far it is the most botched trade decline, and I think that's one of those where 5 years from now we're still going to be talking about it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right. I think that covers it. I guess I'll read off this upcoming week's matchups. Let's see. We got myself versus Big Brain LLC, Go Tigers versus the Most Athletic Sons, I Love My Mom versus the Bussey Boys, Slippery Pete versus Geno and the Zits, Sfogliatella versus Carson Wentz, and Two Pins versus the Vibers. You got any bold predictions for that one? Just this matchup, not just the Vibers and Two Pins, but just these matchups in general.
No, honestly, I don't. After week one, like down week, you're waiting on a lot of people to bounce back. I think a lot of these matchups can go either way. Only thing I'll say is I expect the Emerald to lose. That's the only, and myself. I think I'm going to lose to the Zits too. I'll say I expect the Emerald to lose, and I think I'm going to lose to the Zits. I mean, after that week, after that game, DeAndre Swift put up last night, I don't expect to, compete with Bowen this week.
Yeah, I'm going against Big Brain this week. I obviously had a great start with Jordan Addison getting that long touchdown.
Yep.
I'm still projected to lose by a bunch. I still think that I will be the loser in that matchup, but I guess I'll call it. I feel like every time I play Big Brain, in like the third quarter of the 1 o'clock games, I got him on the ropes. And then by like the third quarter of the 4:30 games, it's like Austin Eckler's got 40 points. McCaffrey just ripped off a big run. He also threw for a touchdown. And then all of a sudden I'm getting blown out. So I look forward to talking my shit around, call it 3 o'clock Sunday afternoon. I'll probably get some jabs in, but beyond that, I probably won't be able to say too much. I guess I'm really just hoping for some closer matchups. I'd like to see a matchup come down to like the Sunday night game where we got 2 Monday night games. I'd like to see maybe at least have some matchups that are coming down to Monday. Let's make it to Monday without having all the matchups be decided. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to some of these bounce back weeks. I think a lot of these teams, I think we're going to see more scoring coming up as these teams that are maybe rusty from no preseason play start to shake that off and get more into their groove. So I'm looking forward to, maybe like the second month of this league or of this season. But until then, this league's great. Everybody's talking their shit. I feel like once the season started, people have become more active. So, hoping we can carry that into the off season as well. And then, have it truly year round, everybody talking their shit. But we're only in year 4 now, so we'll figure that out. But Pete, you got anything else to add, or we can call it at that?
That's it. Let's sign it off.
All right, we'll see you next week. We'll have Amaral on. We'll be doing the first power rankings of the regular season. This is the first time we've done it since our tiers. I think we'll still stick with that tier format. We'll see though. But until then, it is the Lex and Pete show. Thank you to Sundog Multimedia. Thank you to Easy Peasy Moving and Service. We will see you next week.